Welcome to Unity Tips and Tricks. In this video, we're going to take a look at a potential problem you can get when you're using a render texture within a GUITexture component. Here I've set up my scene with a couple of different object sets that leave behind very different alpha values. So on the left here we have a piece of terrain, and on the right we have part of the dead tower scene, which is freely available in the asset store. So now we're going to go back to our scene and make sure that it's rendering into a texture, and we can then apply that to the GUITexture component. So we'll say create render texture, cleverly named, and we'll make sure that our texture camera renders into it. Then we need a GUITexture component here, which we'll call test GUI, and I'm going to set these up so it basically more or less fits the render texture size. And then I'll use some magic numbers here to position it next to where our camera preview is going to be, because we're going to want to compare the two. And finally, let's make sure the GUITexture actually uses our rendered texture. So now we can see the results of all this. If we select the texture camera, we get the camera preview down here, but we also have the GUITexture right next to it so that we can compare the two. So if we move the texture camera down, you can see that everything looks the same pretty much in both. The camera is rendering this correctly into that texture, and the texture is being correctly applied to the GUITexture. However, if we move this over to the terrain, you see that it's only appearing in the camera preview. And that's because the terrain is leaving behind some 0 alpha values, which effectively blend out our GUITexture. One way to get around this problem is by using a clever piece of script developed by the guys at the Programmer's Journal. And you guys can check out the URL inside of the description for the video if you like, but essentially what it's doing is creating a custom material for our GUITexture with an alpha that you can set. And then on post-render, it's going to draw the quad a second time with the new alpha value. So coming back into the editor, I've actually already brought that script in here, and I've applied it to the texture camera with the alpha here set to 1. So if we turn that on, you'd expect to see something now, but it still doesn't work. And that's because the onPostRender function here will only happen at runtime. So to test that, let's just hit play. And now it's good.